Chapter 1, The Shadow of Ravenwood. Aria moved through the gloom, a ghost in her own village. The moon hung heavy and bloated above Ravenwood, casting long, skeletal shadows that stretched across the cobblestone streets like grasping fingers. She kept her head down. That was the first rule of survival when your last name was branded with treason. Keep your eyes on the dirt. Make yourself smaller than the dust motes dancing in the pale light. If they do not see you, they cannot hurt you. The air tasted of wood smoke and impending frost. Winter was bleeding into the autumn air, turning the ground hard and unforgiving beneath her thin, worn boots. She shifted the heavy basket on her hip. It smelled of crushed lavender and dried sage, a pungent bouquet meant to mask the scent of her fear. Mrs. Gable needed this medicine for her joints. The old woman was the only one who didn't spit when Aria walked by, mostly because her eyes were too clouded with cataracts to see the shame painted on Aria's face. Every creak of a wooden sign swaying in the wind sounded like an accusation. A door slammed somewhere in the Alpha's district, the sound cracking like a whip. Aria flinched. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a trapped bird desperate for the sky. Thump. 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 She forced herself to breathe. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Panic was a scent the enforcers could track from a mile away. It smelled like sour milk and ozone. She could not afford to smell like prey tonight. Why did the patrols feel heavier this evening? Usually, the guards were lazy on a Tuesday, drunk on cheap ale and complacency. But tonight, the streets felt taut, like a bowstring pulled to its breaking point. Shadows seemed to detach themselves from the alleyways, watching her. Judging. Perhaps they knew. Maybe the whispers had finally reached the High Council. The thought made her stomach twist into a cold, hard knot. No. They couldn't know. She had been so careful. She reached the Gable cottage, a sagging structure of timber and thatch that looked as tired as she felt. Leaving the basket on the stoop, she didn't knock. Interaction was dangerous. Gratitude was a debt she couldn't ask anyone to pay. As she turned to leave, a howl ripped through the silence. It wasn't the deep, resonant call of a patrol wolf signaling the hour. This was wild. Urgent. A cry that raised the tiny hairs on the back of her neck. It came from the treeline. The forbidden forest. Most wolves in Ravenwood feared those woods. They said the spirits of the road kings wandered there, hungry for the marrow of the living. But Aria didn't fear the dead. The living had done far worse to her. Her father's execution had taught her that monsters didn't always hide in the dark. Sometimes, they wore golden crowns and sat on velvet thrones. She should go home. Her tiny, drafty room in the servants' quarters was safe. It was invisible. But the howl came again, higher this time. A pitch that tugged at something primal in her gut. It sounded young. Helpless. Aria froze. Her boots scuffed against the gravel. The sensible part of her brain screamed to run back to the safety of her anonymity. To ignore the call. Curiosity killed the cat, but in this pack, curiosity got the traitor's daughter public lashings. Yet, her feet didn't listen. They turned toward the treeline, drawn by an invisible thread. The forest loomed ahead, a wall of obsidian trunks and tangled briars. It breathed a cold mist that curled around her ankles like shackles. Why did it feel like the woods were waiting for her? Like the trees themselves had parted to grant her entry? She stepped over the boundary line. The silence swallowed her whole. A twig snapped under her weight, the sound exploding like a gunshot in the quiet. She paused, waiting for the shout of a guard. For the heavy hand of an enforcer on her shoulder. Nothing. Just the wind rustling the dead leaves, whispering secrets she wasn't meant to hear. She crept deeper. The canopy above blocked out the moon, turning the world into shades of charcoal and ink. She had to trust her nose. Beneath the smell of pine and decay, there was something else. Something metallic and sharp. Copper. The scent of fresh blood. Aria pulled her shawl tighter, the rough wool scratching her chin. She wasn't a warrior. She was a healer, a nobody, a stain on the pack's history. But pain was a language she understood fluently. And something in this dark, forbidden place was in agony. Chapter 2, The Snare and the Silent Watcher. The scent led her to a clearing choked with brambles. The smell of iron was overpowering now, mixing with the musky, terrified odor of distressed animals. Aria squinted into the gloom. At first, she saw only a writhing mass of shadow near the base of an ancient oak. Then, the clouds above parted briefly, allowing a sliver of moonlight to pierce the canopy. Her breath hitched. 3 of them. Wolf pups. They were tangled in a mess of silver wire, a poacher's snare, cruel and illegal. The wire had dug deep into the leg of the largest pup, a creature with fur as black as a starless night. The other 2, smaller and silver-gray, huddled against him, whining softly. The black one wasn't whining. He was snarling, snapping his jaws at the invisible enemy, even as the wire cut deeper with every movement. Aria rushed forward, dropping to her knees in the mud. The cold seeped instantly through her trousers, but she didn't feel it. Her focus narrowed to the trap. "Shh," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm not going to hurt you." The black pup lunged, his tiny teeth grazing her knuckles. "A warning? Don't touch us." His eyes were a shocking, luminous gold, too bright, too intelligent for a mere animal. They held a ferocity that made her recoil. These weren't ordinary wolves. The sheer power radiating from them, even in their infancy, tasted like static electricity on her tongue. "You're going to lose that leg if you keep pulling," she scolded gently, ignoring the sting on her hand. She needed to be quick. If a poacher was nearby, she was dead. If a patrol found her here with these pups, she was double dead. She reached into her pocket for the small knife she used to cut herbs. It was dull, barely more than a piece of flattened scrap metal, but it was all she had. "Hold still." Aria moved with practiced hands. She had spent years mending broken wings and splinting fractured legs of the creatures nobody else cared about. She grabbed the wire, the metal biting into her own palms. It was reinforced steel. Hunters didn't use this for rabbits. They used this for lichens. The black pup watched her. He stopped struggling. Those golden eyes bore into hers, assessing, judging. It was unnerving. It felt like looking into the face of a man trapped in a beast's body. He let out a low huff and laid his head on his paws, exposing the wound to her. He trusted her. The trust of a predator was a heavy burden. She sawed at the wire. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the chill. Snap. One strand gave way. Then another. Her fingers were slippery with the pup's blood, and her own. The metallic tang filled her throat. "Almost there," she murmured, more to herself than the wolves. Why were they alone? Pups of this caliber, their fur thick and lustrous, their size already significant, belonged to high-ranking lineage. They should have been surrounded by nannies and guards. Unless they had been stolen. Or lured. The thought made the hair on her arms stand up. This wasn't just a trap. It was an ambush. With a final, gritting effort, the wire snapped. The tension released instantly. The black pup scrambled back, limping but free. He didn't run. He stood his ground, shielding his siblings, and looked at Aria. He chuffed, a sound of gratitude, or perhaps recognition. Then, the air changed. It wasn't a gradual shift. It was instant. The wind died. The crickets ceased their song. The forest held its breath, terrified. A heavy weight settled on Aria's shoulders, a physical pressure that forced the air from her lungs. It was the aura of an alpha. But not just any alpha. This power was ancient. Suffocating. It tasted of ozone, rain, and absolute dominance. Someone was watching. Not a poacher. Not a guard. Something much worse. She stayed on her knees, frozen. Her instincts screamed at her to prostrate herself, to bare her neck in submission. It was a biological imperative woven into her Omega DNA, a command she couldn't fight. But she didn't bow. She couldn't take her eyes off the darkness between the trees. 2 points of light appeared in the shadows. Not yellow. Not orange. Crimson. Glowing, burning red eyes hovered 7 feet off the ground. The pups yipped, a happy, relieved sound, and scrambled toward the darkness. They knew this monster. Aria's heart slammed against her ribs like a trapped bird. She should run. She should scramble backward and beg for mercy. But her legs were turned to stone. The gaze held her. It stripped her bare, peeling back the layers of her anonymity, seeing the traitor's daughter, the healer, the thief of herbs. He saw it all. Chapter 3: The King in the Dark. He did not step into the moonlight. He remained a silhouette of pure destruction, a void where the light dared not touch. But the size of him, gods, the sheer mass of the shadow, blocked out the trees. He was enormous. A creature of nightmares and legends. Aria trembled. The vibration started in her hands and rattled through her bones. The cold mud soaked through her pants was forgotten. The only heat in the world was the burning gaze fixed upon her. Why didn't he attack? An intruder touching the pack's young, that was a death sentence carried out instantly. Tears prickled her eyes, hot and stinging. She waited for the snarl. For the tear of claws against her soft throat. Instead, a sound rumbled through the earth. A low, vibrating purr that shook the leaves on the trees. It wasn't aggressive. It was possessive. The black pup, the brave one, limped to the massive shadow and licked a massive paw that emerged from the gloom. The shadow lowered its head. The red eyes blinked, shifting for a fraction of a second to the injured leg, then snapped back to Aria. He knew what she had done. A flash of lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the clearing for a heartbeat. Aria gasped. In that split second of brilliant white light, she saw him. Not a wolf. A man. A man with wide, powerful shoulders, stripped to the waist, his skin slick with rain that hadn't yet fallen. Dark hair plastered to a brutal, aristocratic face. And on his chest, a tattoo of a crown intertwined with thorns. The Alpha King. Kaelen. The myth said he was heartless. That he had frozen his soul the day his mate died. That he was a monster who ruled with iron and blood. Darkness slammed back down as the lightning faded, blinding her. But the image was burned into her retinas. The king was here. And he had seen her covered in his kin's blood. Go. The voice wasn't spoken. It was pushed directly into her mind, a telepathic command that felt like a velvet hammer. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order given by a god to a mortal. Aria didn't think. Her body obeyed before her brain could process the command. She scrambled backward, her boots slipping in the mud, her breath coming in ragged, sobbing gasps. She turned and ran. She ran blindly, branches whipping her face, thorns tearing at her clothes. She didn't care. She had to get away from that gaze. From the heat that had ignited in her lower belly the moment his voice touched her mind. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the ground. The sky opened up, unleashing a torrent of icy rain. It washed the blood from her hands, but it couldn't wash away the sensation of his eyes on her skin. It felt like a brand. A mark. She burst from the treeline and stumbled onto the cobblestones of the village. It was empty. The storm had driven everyone indoors. Aria didn't stop until she reached the servants' quarters, throwing herself inside and slamming the heavy oak door. She slid down the wood, her chest heaving, her clothes dripping onto the floorboards. Safe. She was safe. She brought her hands up to her face. They were trembling violently. Why had he let her go? Why hadn't he killed her for daring to be near his bloodline? She closed her eyes, trying to slow her racing heart. But behind her eyelids, she saw those burning crimson eyes. She heard that voice, deep and resonant, echoing in the hollow chambers of her soul. Go. It hadn't been a dismissal. It had sounded like a warning. A reprieve. Aria touched her chest, right over her heart. It was beating a new rhythm. Strange. Erratic. Outside, the storm raged, battering the walls of the castle. But the true storm had just begun inside her. She had looked into the eyes of the Alpha King and survived. But as she stared at her clean hands, a terrifying thought took root. He hadn't just let her go. He had let her run. And wolves only let their prey run when they enjoyed the hunt. Chapter 4, Judgment in Gold and Velvet. Morning did not break gently over Ravenwood. It shattered the night with a gray, unforgiving light that offered no warmth. Aria lay awake on her narrow cot. She stared at the cracks in the ceiling. She had not slept. Every time her eyes closed, she saw burning red eyes. She felt the phantom pressure of a voice inside her skull. Go. She had obeyed. She had run. But the feeling of being hunted had not faded. It clung to her skin like a fever. A heavy fist pounded against her door. The wood groaned under the assault. Aria flinched. She sat up, pulling her thin blanket to her chest. It was a futile shield against what was coming. The door did not wait for an invitation. It splintered inward with a deafening crack. 2 royal enforcers filled the small frame. They wore the black leather and silver insignia of the king's personal guard. They did not speak. One of them stepped forward and grabbed her arm. His grip was iron. He hauled her off the bed as if she weighed nothing more than a sack of grain. Wait, Aria gasped. She stumbled, her bare feet hitting the cold floorboards. Let me dress. Please. The guard ignored her. He dragged her into the hallway. The other guard flanked her. They marched her through the servants' wing. Maids and stable boys pressed themselves against the walls. They averted their gaze. No one wanted to be associated with the girl the king's men had come for. Shame burned hot in Aria's cheeks. She wore only her sleeping shift, a shapeless gray thing that hung to her knees. It was thin. Threadbare. It offered no protection against the cold drafts of the castle corridors or the prying eyes of the court. They moved higher into the castle. The stone turned from rough gray to polished marble. Tapestries depicted great hunts and bloody wars. The air grew warmer, scented with beeswax and expensive perfume. They were entering the Alpha's wing. The throne room. Fear turned to ice in her veins. This was where her father had died. This was where they dragged traitors before they dragged them to the chopping block. The great double doors of the throne room loomed ahead. They were carved from black wood, inlaid with silver wolves that seemed to writhe in the torchlight. The guards pushed the doors open. A hush fell over the room. It was packed. The High Council sat in their elevated box, draped in crimson robes. The nobles of the pack stood in clusters, a sea of silk and jewels. Hundreds of eyes swiveled to Aria. She felt the weight of their disdain. She heard the word rippling through the crowd like a hiss of steam. Traitor. The guards threw her to the floor in the center of the room. The marble bit into her knees. She kept her head down. She stared at the intricate mosaic of the moon on the floor. "Look at her," a voice sneered from the council box. "Filth in the king's hall." "She was seen in the forbidden forest," another voice added. "Spying for the rogues, no doubt. Just like her father." Aria bit her lip until she tasted copper. She wanted to scream that she had saved the king's bloodline. She wanted to tell them about the pups. But fear choked her. If she spoke, she died. If she stayed silent, she died. Then the air changed. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees in a second. The whispering died instantly. A silence so absolute, so terrified, descended upon the hall that Aria could hear the torch flames sputtering. Heavy footsteps echoed against the stone. Slow. Deliberate. Each step was a vibration that rattled Aria's teeth. She did not need to look up. Her wolf, buried deep and dormant for years, suddenly thrashed in her chest. It whimpered. It recognized the predator approaching. King Kaelen stopped in front of her. She saw his boots first. Black leather, splashed with fresh mud. He had not changed since the night before. He had not slept. Aria trembled. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the execution order. Waiting for the blow. "Look at me." The voice was gravel and thunder. It was not telepathic this time. It was spoken aloud, resonating off the vaulted ceiling. Aria forced her head up. He towered over her. In the daylight, he was even more terrifying. He was a landscape of hard muscle and old scars. His face was a mask of cold fury, sharp cheekbones, and a jaw that could crush stone. But his eyes. They weren't glowing red now. They were a piercing, unnatural amber. And they were locked on her. He reached down. The court gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the air from the room. An alpha king did not touch a traitor. It was forbidden. It was pollution. His fingers brushed her chin. His skin was rough, calloused, and shockingly hot. He tilted her face up, exposing her throat. Aria stopped breathing. This was it. He was going to rip her throat out in front of them all. He didn't strike. He leaned in. He inhaled deeply at the pulse point of her neck. "Mine," he growled. The word hit the room like a physical blow. The council erupted into chaos. Shouts of protest rang out. But Kaelen did not look at them. He kept his eyes on Aria. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, a touch that was half caress, half claim. A searing heat flared where his skin touched hers. It wasn't just warmth. It was fire. It shot down her spine and curled in her belly. The mark. He wasn't biting her, but his declaration was binding enough. The magic of the pack slammed into her, tethering her broken soul to his iron will. Silence. Kaelen roared without turning his head. The room froze again. He looked down at Aria, his expression unreadable. "Get her out of these rags," he commanded the nearest guard, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And if anyone touches her again, I will take their hand." Chapter 5: The Hunter's Maze. Aria did not wait for the guards to obey. The moment Kaelen released her chin, she scrambled backward. The heat of his touch still branded her skin. The word mine echoed in her ears, a chaotic drumbeat drowning out her sanity. She turned and ran. This time, she didn't run toward the exit. The doors were blocked by stunned courtiers. She bolted toward the side servants' passage, a narrow archway half hidden by a velvet curtain. She knew these tunnels. She had scrubbed their floors for 5 years. They were the veins of the castle, invisible to the lords and ladies who walked the halls. She ducked behind the curtain and sprinted into the dark stone corridor. Her bare feet slapped against the cold flagstones. Her lungs burned. She had to get away. She had to think. Mine. What did he mean? Was she a prisoner? A slave? A sacrifice? The castle was a labyrinth, but panic made her careless. She took a wrong turn, then another. The servants' passages usually led down to the kitchens or the laundry, but she found herself climbing. The stairs spiraled upward, the air growing thinner and colder. She stopped on a landing, leaning against the rough stone wall to catch her breath. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Thump thump. Thump thump. It was too loud. Then she realized it wasn't her heart. It was a second heartbeat. Slow. Powerful. Syncing with hers. Aria pushed herself off the wall. The bond. The connection he had forced upon her in the throne room was alive. It was a thread of golden fire pulling at her navel, tugging her, somewhere. She turned to run back down the stairs. A shadow detached itself from the darkness above. Kaelen stood at the top of the landing. He had shed his formal cloak. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the edge of that dark, thorny tattoo. He watched her with the stillness of a wolf observing a trapped rabbit. "You cannot run from this, Aria," he said. His voice was soft, which was far more terrifying than his shout. "I am not a toy," she gasped, backing away until her heels hit the edge of the step. "I am not something you can just claim because you feel like it." "My father." "Your father is dead," Kaelen cut in. He took a step down. Then another. He moved with a predator's grace, silent and inevitable. "And the pack would see you join him. Do you think you left that room alive because of their mercy? You left alive because I placed my protection over you." "I don't want your protection," she lied. Her voice shook. "Liar." He was closer now. Only a few steps away. The scent of him washed over her, rain, ozone, and deep, dark forest. It made her head spin. It made her knees weak. "Your heart is racing. Your scent has changed. You smell like lavender and desire." Aria flushed. "I smell like fear." "Fear and desire are twins, little wolf." He stopped on the step directly above her. He loomed over her, blocking out the torchlight. "They both make the blood pump faster." He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. Aria flinched, expecting a blow. He paused. A flicker of something, pain, crossed his amber eyes. "I will not hurt you," he said, the words gritty, as if they cost him something to say. "You saved the pups. You saved my heirs." Aria blinked. "The heirs. The pups in the woods. They are safe. They are safe. Because of you." His hand finally closed the distance, his fingers tangling in her messy, unwashed hair. He tugged gently, forcing her to look at him. "The council wanted your head on a spike for entering the forbidden forest. I gave them a claim instead. You belong to me now, Aria. Not as a prisoner. But as something else." "What?" she whispered. The proximity was overwhelming. She could feel the heat radiating from his chest. She wanted to lean into it. Her wolf was scratching at the surface, desperate to submit to him. She hated it. "A problem," he murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. "A beautiful, dangerous problem." He didn't kiss her. He leaned past her, his lips brushing her ear. "Go to your room. Lock the door. The storm is coming, and tonight, I cannot promise to be a king." He pulled back, his eyes burning with that familiar, dangerous crimson light. "Tonight, the wolf rules." Chapter 6, The Storm Inside. Aria fled to her room, but the sanctuary she sought was gone. The small, drafty chamber felt like a cage. She paced the length of the floorboards, 4 steps one way, 4 steps back. Outside, the sky had turned a bruised purple. The storm Kaelen had predicted arrived with a vengeance. Thunder shook the castle foundations. Rain lashed against the narrow window pane like handfuls of gravel. Tonight, the wolf rules. His warning replayed in her mind on an endless loop. She hugged herself, trying to stop the shivering. It wasn't cold in the room. It was hot. A feverish heat radiated from her bones. The mark on her soul, the invisible tether connecting her to him, was pulsing. It throbbed in time with the thunder. Aria moved to the window. She looked down into the courtyard. It was empty, washed clean by the deluge. But she felt him. He was close. The bond jerked, a sharp physical tug that made her gasp. It wasn't a gentle pull this time. It was a command. Her door handle turned. Aria spun around. She had locked it. She had wedged a chair under the handle. The wood groaned. The metal lock shrieked in protest. With a sudden, violent crack, the door frame gave way. The door swung open, hitting the stone wall with a thud. Kaelen stood there. He looked wild. His shirt was gone. His skin was slick with rain, as if he had been standing out in the storm. His chest heaved with ragged breaths. The tattoo of the crown and thorns seemed to move on his skin, shifting with the tension of his muscles. And his eyes. They were no longer amber. They were entirely red. There was no man left in them. Only the beast. You didn't lock it well enough, he rasped. His voice was distorted, deeper, vibrating with a growl. Aria backed up until her legs hit the edge of her cot. You told me to hide. I told you I couldn't promise. He stepped into the room. The air pressure instantly dropped. The scent of ozone saturated the small space, thick and suffocating. The bond. It's too loud. It screams your name. He closed the distance in 2 long strides. He didn't touch her gently this time. He grabbed her waist, his hands spanning her ribs, his grip bordering on painful. He lifted her, pinning her against the cold stone wall. Aria gasped, her hands instinctively finding his shoulders to steady herself. His skin was burning. You saved what is mine, he growled, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He inhaled sharply, his nose brushing her sensitive skin. Now you belong to me. That is the law of the blood. That is the law of the wild. I don't care about your laws, Aria managed to say, though her voice lacked conviction. Her body was betraying her. Her hands were clutching his wet shoulders, pulling him closer instead of pushing him away. I am not a possession. Kaelen pulled back. He looked at her, his red eyes searching her face. No. You are not a possession. You are a necessity. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the raw hunger in his expression. The prophecy, he whispered, the words disjointed, as if he were fighting a war inside his own head. It said she would come from the shadows. It said she would have the courage of a warrior and the hands of a healer. He pressed his forehead against hers. My wolf is dying, Aria. It is consumed by a rage I cannot control. But when I am near you... He shuddered. The vibration traveled through her body. It goes quiet. You are the only thing that quiets the storm. Aria's breath hitched. He was the Alpha King. The most powerful being in the kingdom. And he was shaking in her arms. Why me, she asked, her voice barely audible over the rain. Because fate is cruel, he answered. And because you are the only one who didn't run from the monster in the woods. He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was desperation and hunger and anger all wrapped into one searing moment. His lips crushed hers, demanding a response. He tasted of rain and power. Aria stiffened for a second, then melted. She couldn't help it. The bond roared in triumph, a wave of golden light crashing through her mind. She opened to him, her hands sliding into his wet hair. For a moment, the world narrowed down to the friction of their bodies and the sound of the rain. Then Kaelen tore himself away. He stumbled back, chest heaving. He looked at her with wide, wild eyes, as if horrified by what he had just done. "I cannot," he choked out. "Not like this. Not when I could break you." He turned and stormed out of the room, disappearing into the dark corridor, leaving Aria sliding down the wall, her lips swollen, her heart shattered, and the storm raging louder than ever. Chapter 7, Silk and Serpents. Morning light did not bring clarity. It brought a battalion of servants. They swept into Aria's new chambers like a tide of starch and efficiency. Gone were the drafty stone walls of the servants' quarters. This room was a cavern of velvet and gold leaf. It smelled of lavender and power. Aria sat on the edge of the massive four-poster bed. She felt small. She felt like an imposter wearing a queen's skin. Her fingers traced the intricate embroidery on the duvet. It was silver thread on midnight blue silk. The crest of the Alpha King. Last night still burned on her lips. The memory of Kaelen's desperation was a physical weight in her chest. He had kissed her like a drowning man seeking air. Then he had left her freezing in the dark. "Up, girl. We do not have all day." The sharp voice belonged to an older woman with hair the color of steel wool. She held a dress that looked less like clothing and more like a weapon. It was deep crimson with a neckline that plunged dangerously low. "I can dress myself," Aria said. Her voice sounded rusty. "Not for where you are going," the woman snapped. She gestured for the maids to advance. "The High Council demands your presence at the morning address. The king has claimed you, but the pack has not accepted you. Appearance is the first line of defense." Appearance was a lie. Aria knew this better than anyone. Her father had worn the finest silks the day they dragged him to the block. The maids scrubbed her skin until it was raw. They anointed her with oils that smelled of jasmine and musk. They laced her into the crimson gown until her ribs ached. When they finished, Aria looked in the mirror. The girl staring back was a stranger. Her eyes were too wide. Her mouth was too red. She looked like a sacrifice dressed for the altar. A knock echoed through the room. It was not the polite tap of a servant. It was the heavy thud of a guard. 2 enforcers escorted her through the corridors. They did not speak. They did not look at her. Aria kept her head high, though her knees trembled with every step. The castle felt different today. The whispers followed her. Servants paused in their work to stare. Nobles clustered in alcoves, their voices dropping to hushed murmurs as she passed. Traitor's blood. Whore. Witch. She heard the words. She let them slide off her armored heart. She had survived worse than gossip. They reached the heavy oak doors of the council chamber. The guards pushed them open. The room was circular, dominated by a massive round table of dark wood. 12 men and women sat around it. They wore robes of heavy velvet. Their faces were masks of judgment. At the head of the table sat Kaelen. He looked nothing like the wild, desperate creature from the night before. He was composed. Cold. His amber eyes met hers with the indifference of a statue. He wore a tunic of black leather and a crown of simple iron. He looked like a king who ruled by the sword. Approach, a thin man with a face like a vulture hissed. This was Councilman Vane. Aria recognized him. He had been the one to read her father's death sentence. Aria walked forward. The floor was polished obsidian. It felt like walking on black ice. You stand before the High Council, Vane announced. He did not stand. He leaned back, his fingers steepled. The king claims you carry a debt of life. That you saved the royal heirs. We require proof. The proof is that they are breathing, Aria said. Her voice was steady. A ripple of shock went through the room. Omegas did not speak back to councilmen. Kaelen's hand twitched on the table. She speaks the truth, Vane. The pups were found in her care. The snare was cut by her hand. Or perhaps she set the snare, Vane countered smoothly. His eyes were black beads of malice. Perhaps she lured them there to play the hero. A traitor's daughter knows how to manipulate. It runs in the blood because the apple does not fall far from the poison tree. Aria felt a spark of anger ignite in her gut. It was hot and sudden. I am not my father. No, Vane smiled. It was an expression devoid of warmth. You are something far more dangerous. You are a distraction. And this pack cannot afford distractions when war breeds on our borders. He leaned forward. The scent of rotting lilies rolled off him. Make no mistake, girl. The king's mark may protect your body, but it does not protect your place here. One slip. One mistake. And we will finish what the executioner started with your line. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Kaelen stood. The chair scraped loudly against the stone. Enough. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of a landslide. She is under my protection. Any threat to her is a threat to the crown. Do you wish to challenge me, Vane? Vane paled. He lowered his eyes. No, my king. Merely testing the steel. Kaelen looked at Aria. For a second, the mask slipped. She saw the warning in his eyes. The fear. Be careful, his gaze said. But as Aria looked around the table, at the 12 pairs of eyes watching her with calculating hunger, she realized something terrifying. The king was powerful. But he was outnumbered. And in a room full of wolves, the one who bears their throat first is the one who gets torn apart. Chapter 8, The Feast of Knives. Night fell like a shroud over the castle. The great hall was transformed. Long tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats and spiced wines. The air was thick with the heat of 1,000 candles and the noise of the pack feasting. It was the rite of moonlight, a monthly gathering where the pack reaffirmed their loyalty to the alpha. For Aria, it was a test of endurance. She sat at the high table, to the right of Kaelen. It was a position of honor. It was a target painted on her back. She stared at her plate. The venison looked raw. The wine looked like blood. She had not eaten all day. Nausea churned in her stomach. Every time she lifted her fork, she felt eyes boring into her skin. Kaelen had barely spoken to her. He was engaged in a low, intense conversation with his beta, a scarred warrior named Thorn. They spoke of border skirmishes and rogue movements. Aria was excluded. She was a decoration. A silent doll placed on a shelf. You are not eating, a voice purred from her left. Aria turned. A woman with hair like spun gold and eyes like chips of ice smiled at her. It was Lady Lyra, the daughter of a powerful southern alpha. Rumor said she had been campaigning for Kaelen's hand for years. I am not hungry, Aria replied. Nerves, Lyra said. She took a sip of her wine. Her nails were painted crimson. It must be overwhelming. To sit at a table you are not bred for. The altitude at the top can make one dizzy if they are used to the gutter. Aria stiffened. I am managing. Are you? Lyra laughed softly. It was a cruel sound. Look at him, sweet thing. He is a king. A warrior born of ancient blood. And you? You are a healer with dirt under your fingernails. Do you really think a mark changes what you are? Lyra leaned closer. Her perfume was cloying. He claimed you out of obligation. Gratitude for the pups. But a king needs a queen. Not a charity case. Aria gripped her goblet until her knuckles turned white. He claimed me because he chose to. Did he? Lyra's smile vanished. Then why does he not look at you? Why does he sit miles away in spirit even when he is inches away in flesh? He knows he made a mistake. He is just too honorable to admit it. The words struck deep because they echoed Aria's own fears. Kaelen was distant. He was cold. Had last night been a moment of weakness he now regretted? Suddenly, the hall went quiet. A massive warrior from the Eastern Territories stood up. He held a heavy goblet aloft. He was drunk. His face was flushed. To the king, he bellowed. The hall cheered. And to his guest, the warrior added. The cheer died instantly. He sneered at Aria. Tell us, little Omega. Is it true you charmed the pups with herbs? Did you drug the king's heirs to make yourself a savior? The accusation hung heavy in the silence. Aria stood up. Her chair scraped against the stone. Her legs were shaking, but she forced them to hold her weight. I used no herbs, she said. Her voice trembled, but it carried. I used my hands. And my heart. Things you seem to lack. The warrior snarled. He moved to step over the bench. He was going to challenge her. A blur of motion stopped him. Kaelen was there. He hadn't walked. He had moved with supernatural speed. One hand was wrapped around the warrior's throat. He lifted the massive man off the ground as if he were a child. You question my mate? Kaelen's voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Mate. He had said it. Publicly. The warrior choked, clawing at Kaelen's hand. Kaelen's eyes were glowing amber. The power radiating off him was suffocating. It pressed down on the hall, forcing every wolf to lower their head. She is not a guest, Kaelen snarled. He threw the warrior backward. The man crashed into a table, sending plates and goblets flying. She is the one I have marked. The next tongue that disrespects her will be cut from its root. He turned to the hall. His chest heaved. Is that understood? Yes, my king, the pack chanted in unison. It was a sound of fear, not love. Kaelen turned to Aria. For the first time that night, he really looked at her. His eyes were wild. Haunted. He reached out, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. His fingers were trembling. Sit, he commanded gently. Aria sat. But she saw the truth now. Lady Lyra was wrong. He wasn't ignoring her because he regretted her. He was ignoring her because he was terrifyingly close to losing control. He was a bomb waiting to detonate. And she was the only one holding the fuse. Chapter 9, Shadows and Silver. The feast ended in a tense, hurried silence. Kaelen escorted Aria to her chambers, his hand firm on the small of her back. He did not speak. He vibrated with tension. At her door, he stopped. The hallway was dim, lit only by flickering torches. Lock the door, he said. It was the same command as the night before. Do not open it for anyone. Not even me. Kaelen. Do it, he growled. He turned and marched away, his cape swirling around him like a storm cloud. Aria watched him go. She felt the bond stretching between them, taut and painful. She went inside and threw the heavy bolt. She didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the moon rise. The events of the day swirled in her mind. Vane's threats. Lyra's poison. Kaelen's violence. The castle was asleep. Silence pressed against the stone walls. Then she heard it. A soft scrape. Like metal on stone. It came from the balcony. Aria froze. Her room was on the 3rd floor. No one could climb that high. Unless they were not human. She stood up slowly. She backed away from the window. The latch on the balcony doors clicked. It slid upward. Aria looked for a weapon. There was nothing. Only a heavy brass candlestick on the mantelpiece. She grabbed it. It felt pitifully light in her hand. The doors swung open. A figure stepped out of the shadows. He was dressed in tight black leather that absorbed the light. His face was covered by a mask. In his hand, a curved dagger gleamed. The blade was dull gray. Silver. Wolfsbane-coated silver. A single scratch would be agony. A deep cut would be death. "Who are you?" Aria demanded. Her voice was steady, though her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The assassin didn't speak. He lunged. Aria threw the candlestick. It struck him in the shoulder, but he barely flinched. He was fast. Too fast. He closed the distance in a heartbeat. His hand clamped around her throat, cutting off her scream. He slammed her against the wall. The silver blade rose. Aria clawed at his mask. She kicked out, her knee connecting with his gut. He grunted but didn't let go. Black spots danced in her vision. She was going to die. Here in this velvet room. Just like her father. Kaelen. She screamed his name not with her voice, but with her soul. She threw the panic down the bond, a jagged spear of terror. The door to her room exploded inward. It didn't swing open. It shattered. Wood and iron turned to shrapnel. A beast entered the room. It wasn't Kaelen. Not entirely. It was a monster of shadow and rage. He moved so fast he was a blur. He tackled the assassin, tearing him away from Aria. They crashed into the vanity table. Glass shattered. The assassin tried to stab, but Kaelen caught his wrist. There was a sickening snap of bone. The assassin screamed. Kaelen roared. It was a sound from the depths of hell. He lifted the man and threw him across the room. The assassin hit the stone wall with a wet crunch and slid to the floor, motionless. Aria gasped for air, clutching her bruised throat. She looked at Kaelen. He was standing over the body. His chest heaved. His hands were claws. His eyes were glowing so bright red they illuminated the dark room. He turned to her. For a second, Aria thought he didn't recognize her. He looked at her like prey. Like something to be torn apart. "Kaelen," she whispered. She held up a hand. "It's me." The sound of her voice seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He blinked. The red faded slightly, revealing the terrified amber beneath. He looked at the broken door. At the unconscious assassin. At the bruises forming on her neck. He choked on the word. He looked at his hands, trembling violently. "I almost didn't make it," he whispered. The horror in his voice was absolute. "I almost lost you." He fell to his knees. The great Alpha King, the monster of legends, collapsed on the rug. He buried his face in his hands. Aria realized then that the danger wasn't just the assassin. The danger wasn't just the council. The danger was that Kaelen cared too much. And in a world built on power, love was the deadliest weakness of all. She crawled to him. She wrapped her arms around his shaking shoulders. She didn't care about the blood. She didn't care about the beast. "I'm here," she said. "I'm alive." But as she held him, she looked at the assassin's mask lying on the floor. It bore a symbol stitched into the fabric. A small, silver crescent moon crossed with a dagger. She had seen that symbol before. It belonged to the queen's personal guard. The queen who had been dead for 20 years. Kaelen's mother. The threat wasn't coming from outside the walls. It was rotting from the inside out. And they were standing right in the center of the decay. Chapter 10, The Gilded Cage. The sun rose over Ravenwood like a bruised plum, casting purple shadows across the floor of the king's private chambers. Aria did not sleep. She sat on the edge of a bed large enough to sleep a family of 4. The sheets smelled of pine needles and rain. They smelled of him. Kaelen had moved her here immediately after the attack. He had carried her through the halls himself, snarling at anyone who dared to look at them. Now, she was locked in the heart of the beast's lair. The room was magnificent and terrifying. Walls of dark mahogany lined with ancient books stretched to the ceiling. A fire crackled in a hearth carved from obsidian. But the windows were barred with decorative ironwork. It was a prison. A beautiful, warm, expensive prison. Aria stood up and paced. Her reflection caught in the tall mirror in the corner. The bruises on her neck were blooming into ugly shades of violet and yellow. They looked like fingerprints. A reminder of how close death had come. She reached into her pocket. Her fingers brushed the scrap of fabric she had stolen from the floor before Kaelen whisked her away. The black silk mask. The silver crescent moon stitched into the hem burned her fingertips. The queen's crest. Kaelen's mother had been dead for 2 decades, yet her symbol had tried to kill the new favorite. The heavy door clicked. The sound was loud in the silence. Kaelen entered. He looked exhausted. Dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes. He had changed into a fresh shirt, but he hadn't buttoned it all the way. The ink of his tattoo peeked out, a black thorn climbing his collarbone. He carried a tray of food. "Eat," he said. His voice was rough. "You missed the feast." "I lost my appetite when a man tried to carve me like a turkey," Aria replied. She did not move toward the food. "I want to go to my room. My real room." Kaelen set the tray down on a low table with a sharp clack. He turned to her. His movements were stiff, like a man holding back a landslide. "That room is a crime scene. And it is indefensible. You stay here." "For how long?" Aria demanded. "Forever? Am I to be a pet kept in your bedroom?" "You are to be safe." Kaelen roared. The volume shook the glass in the window frames. He closed his eyes and exhaled sharply. When he opened them, the amber was dull. The assassin was a professional. He bypassed 3 layers of wards. "If I had been a second slower, you would be a corpse on the floor. Do not speak to me of freedom when I am trying to keep you breathing." Aria pulled the piece of fabric from her pocket. She threw it onto the table between them. "And who sent him, Kaelen? Who uses your mother's crest?" Kaelen froze. He stared at the black silk. His face drained of color. For a moment, the invincible Alpha King looked like a lost boy standing in the rain. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "It was on his mask," Aria said. She took a step closer. "You know who it is. You recognized the fighting style. That is why you didn't chase the others. That is why you are terrified." Kaelen snatched the fabric up. His fist clenched around it until his knuckles turned white. "My mother's guard was disbanded when she died. This is a mockery. A ghost story designed to unbalance me." "It is working," Aria observed. "You are unraveling." He looked at her then. The intensity of his gaze pinned her to the spot. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He didn't touch her. He stopped inches away, his body radiating heat. I am unraveling because the bond screams that you are in danger every second. I am not touching you, he confessed. His voice dropped to a low rasp. My wolf does not understand politics. It does not understand assassins. It only knows that its mate was threatened. It wants to burn the world down to find the threat. And I am barely holding the match back. Aria looked up at him. She saw the fracture in his armor. The terrified creature behind the king's eyes. Then let me help you, she said softly. Let me investigate. I am a nobody. People talk around servants. They don't talk around kings. No. The refusal was instant. You do not leave this room. If you try, I will chain you to the bed myself. Aria bristled. The fear melted into anger. You cannot keep me here. Watch me, Kaelen snarled. He turned and walked to the door. Eat. I have a council to dismantle. The lock clicked shut behind him. A heavy, final sound. Aria stared at the door. He thought he could cage her for her own good. He thought she was fragile. But she had survived the streets of Ravenwood alone for 5 years. She walked to the window and gripped the iron bars. He was wrong. The wolf might rule the night, but the mouse knew how to find the cracks in the wall. And she was going to find out who wanted her dead, with or without the king's permission. Chapter 11, The Oracle's Verdict. The lock was heavy, but the hinges were old. Aria had learned a trick or two living in the crumbling servants' quarters. A thin metal nail file, stolen from the vanity, and 10 minutes of sweating patience popped the pins on the secondary service door hidden behind a tapestry. She slipped out into the corridor. She didn't go down to the kitchens. She went down. Down past the dungeons. Down into the roots of the castle where the air turned cold and smelled of wet earth. She needed answers. And in Ravenwood, answers lived in the crypt of the seers. The tunnels were dark. Water dripped from the ceiling, echoing like a ticking clock. Aria hugged her shawl tighter. She shouldn't be here. This place was forbidden to anyone but the Alpha and the Elders. But the desperation in Kaelen's eyes drove her forward. She reached the circular chamber at the bottom of the world. The walls were lined with skulls of ancient wolves. In the center sat a woman. She was incredibly old. Her skin looked like parchment stretched over bone. She was blind, her eyes covered by a strip of white linen. She sat before a pool of still, black water. The mouse creeps where the wolves fear to tread, the woman croaked. She did not turn her head. Aria froze. I seek the truth. Truth is a blade without a handle, the seer said. She gestured with a withered hand. Come closer, Aria of the shadows. The blood of the traitor runs hot in your veins. Aria stepped forward. The air here was thick with magic. It tasted of ozone and decay. Why is he losing control? Why is the king broken? The seer laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound. He is not broken, child. He is overflowing. The curse of the Alpha line is power without a vessel. His wolf is too strong for a human soul. It eats him from the inside out. It demands blood. It demands a tether. The seer dipped her hand into the black water. The liquid rippled, turning silver. Images swirled on the surface. A wolf with burning red eyes. A city in flames. A woman standing in the ashes. The prophecy was spoken the night he was born, the seer whispered. Her voice took on a rhythmic, chanting quality. A heart of silence to quell the roar. Hands of healing to bind the sore. If the mate accepts the beast within, the golden age will then begin. But if the bond is severed by fear or hate, the king shall meet a rogue's dark fate. Aria stared at the water. A rogue's fate? Madness, the seer hissed. Total loss of humanity. If he does not bond fully, if you do not accept him, beast and man, he will become a mindless monster. He will destroy the pack. He will destroy you. I have accepted the mark, Aria said. Her hands trembled. The mark is skin deep. The seer slammed her hand on the stone rim of the pool. The bond requires the soul. You fear him. You fear his rage. You fear your own unworthy blood. As long as you hold back, the wolf fights the leash. You are not just his mate, girl. You are his medicine. Or you are his poison. Aria stumbled back. The weight of the words crushed her. It wasn't just a romance. It wasn't just a political match. She was the only thing standing between Kaelen and insanity. Who sent the assassin? Aria asked, desperate to change the subject. The seer smiled. Her teeth were yellow and sharp. The past does not stay buried. The queen's crest flies, but the hand that holds it is not a ghost. Look to the one who desires the crown but wears a mask of friendship. Look to the blood that is not blood. Footsteps thundered in the tunnel behind her. Heavy. Fast. He comes, the seer whispered. She waved her hand. Go. Before he finds you here. He must not know you have seen the bottom of the well. Aria ran. She scrambled up the damp stone stairs, her heart pounding. The prophecy rang in her ears. You are his medicine. Or you are his poison. She burst into the upper corridor just as Kaelen turned the corner. He stopped. He looked at her muddy hem. He smelled the decay of the crypts on her skin. His eyes flashed amber. Where have you been? Aria looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw the tremor in his hands. She saw the sweat on his brow. He was fighting a war inside his own skin every second of every day. And she had been adding to the burden with her fear. I was looking for a way to save you, she lied, or perhaps it was the truth. Kaelen grabbed her arm. His grip was desperate. You saved me by staying alive. Never go down there again. The seer speaks in riddles that drive men mad. He pulled her close. Promise me. I promise, Aria whispered. But she knew it was too late. She knew the stakes now. If she didn't love him, fully, wildly, without fear, he would become a monster. And she wasn't sure if she could love a beast that terrified her. Chapter 12, Blood in the Water. The next day, the castle was a hive of activity. A delegation from the southern pack had arrived. Alpha Roderick, a man with shoulders like a bull and a reputation for cruelty, rode through the gates with 50 warriors. Aria stood on the balcony of Kaelen's chambers. She watched the arrival. Lady Lyra rode beside Roderick. Her father. Kaelen entered the room. He was dressed in formal armor. Black leather reinforced with silver plates. He strapped a sword to his hip. You will stay here, he said. It was his mantra now. Roderick is here to challenge you, Aria said. She turned to face him. He knows you are weak. He smells the instability. He smells nothing, Kaelen snapped. He adjusted his bracer. I am the king. I will handle Roderick. Let me stand by you, Aria pleaded. If I hide, it shows weakness. It shows you are afraid to display your mate. If we stand together, it shows unity. Kaelen looked at her. He hesitated. The wolf wanted her close. The man wanted her safe. The wolf won. Do not leave my side, he ordered. If steel is drawn, you run. You do not look back. They descended to the great hall. Roderick stood in the center of the room. He did not bow. He grinned, revealing gold-capped teeth. King Kaelen, Roderick boomed. His voice echoed off the stone. You look tired. Running a kingdom is tiring work, Kaelen replied. His voice was ice. Unlike grazing cattle, which I assume keeps you well rested. Roderick's grin faltered. I come to discuss the border disputes. And to offer congratulations. My daughter tells me you have finally taken a mate. Roderick's eyes slid to Aria. They were predatory. Disgusting. He looked her up and down as if she were a prize mare at an auction. A pretty thing, Roderick sneered. Small. Fragile. Is this the best the Ravenwood line could produce? A servant girl to warm the king's bed? Aria felt Kaelen stiffen beside her. A low growl started in his chest. It was a vibration that rattled her bones. She is my queen, Kaelen said. The air in the room began to vibrate. The torches flickered. Queen? Roderick laughed. A queen needs a pedigree, Kaelen. This is a mongrel. A traitor's whelp. Did you pick her because she was easy? Or because you knew a real she-wolf would tear your throat out? Snap. The sound of Kaelen's control breaking was audible. Black veins shot up his neck. His eyes went from amber to crimson in a heartbeat. He didn't draw his sword. He didn't need to. Claws, long and razor-sharp, burst from his fingertips. I will mount your head on the gate, Kaelen roared. He lunged. He moved so fast he was a blur. He collided with Roderick, slamming the massive alpha into the stone floor. Kaelen was on top of him in an instant. His hand raised, claws ready to rip Roderick's heart out. The southern warriors drew their weapons. The Ravenwood guard drew theirs. Stop! Aria screamed. She threw herself into the fray. She didn't think. She grabbed Kaelen's arm. The contact was electric. Kaelen swung his head around. He snarled at her. His face was contorted into a mask of pure beast. He didn't recognize her. He was going to kill her. Kaelen, look at me, she shouted. She placed her hands on his cheeks. She ignored the claws digging into her waist. She forced him to look into her eyes. It's a trap, she whispered urgently. He wants you to kill him. He wants you to start a war so the council can declare you mad. Do not give him the satisfaction. The red in Kaelen's eyes swirled. He blinked. He looked at Roderick beneath him, whose throat was inches from being torn out. Then he looked at Aria. The madness receded. Just an inch. But it was enough. He froze. His chest heaved like a bellows. You are the king, Aria said firmly. Kings do not slaughter guests. Even the pigs. Kaelen slowly lowered his hand. He stood up, dragging Aria with him. He shielded her with his body. Get him out of my sight, Kaelen commanded his guards. His voice was wrecked. Before I finish my meal. Roderick scrambled up. He looked terrified, but there was a gleam of triumph in his eyes. He had seen the monster. Everyone had seen it. As the hall cleared, Kaelen turned to Aria. He was shaking violently. The claws receded, leaving his fingers bloody. You should not have touched me, he whispered. I could have killed you. But you didn't, Aria said. She took his bloody hand in hers. She looked at the door where Roderick had fled. She realized the seer was right. The golden tether was the only thing holding him back. And today, she had pulled it tight. But Roderick had seen the cracks. And now, the whole world knew that the Alpha King was one bad day away from becoming a devil. Chapter 13, The Voice of the Silenced. Aria stood before the heavy iron-bound doors of the petition hall. Dust coated the handles. Cobwebs spanned the corners like intricate lace curtains woven by neglect. This part of the castle had been closed since Kaelen's father died. The council preferred to rule from high towers where the cries of the hungry could not reach them. Today that silence ended. She wore the crimson dress again, but this time it did not feel like a costume. It felt like armor. She smoothed the silk over her hips and gripped the iron ring. It was heavy. Cold. She pulled. The hinges screamed a protest that echoed through the cavernous space. The sound drew attention. Servants paused in their scrubbing. Guards at the end of the corridor turned, hands drifting to their hilts. Aria ignored them. She pushed the doors wide open and stepped into the musty gloom. Sunlight from the high windows cut through the dust motes like golden blades. She turned to the nearest guard. He was a young man with a scar running through his eyebrow. "Open the main gates," Aria commanded. Her voice was steady. "Let the pack in. Anyone with a grievance. Anyone with a hunger. The queen is listening." The guard hesitated. He looked toward the stairs leading to the Alpha's wing, then back at her. The mark on her neck pulsed, a subtle reminder of who stood behind her. He bowed low and ran to obey. Within the hour, the hall was full. They came hesitantly at first. Omegas with worn clothes and rough hands. Farmers who smelled of soil and fertilizer. Mothers clutching babes wrapped in wool. They looked at her with wide, fearful eyes. They were used to being invisible. Aria knew that look. She had worn it for 5 years. She sat on the simple wooden chair at the front of the room. She refused the raised dais. "Speak," she said to an old woman whose hands were twisted with arthritis. "I know you. You are Mrs. Gable. I used to leave herbs on your step." The old woman gasped. Tears welled in her milky eyes. "The traitor's daughter," she whispered. "You remembered." "I am the king's mate now," Aria corrected gently. "And I remember that the roof of your cottage leaks when the winter rains come." "Does the council know?" "The council knows nothing of leaks," a sharp voice cut through the room. Councilman Vane strode into the hall. He was followed by 4 enforcers. His robes were immaculate. His face was a mask of disdain. "This is an unauthorized gathering," Vane sneered. He swept his gaze over the cowering crowd. "Disperse. Or be arrested for sedition." The villagers shrank back. The smell of fear spiked in the room, sour and acrid. Aria stood up. She did not shrink. "Unauthorized by whom?" she challenged. "I am the queen. My authority supersedes your bureaucracy." Vane laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound. "You are a placeholder. A broodmare. You have no seat on the council. You have no voice here." He signaled his guards. "Escort her back to her cage. And clear this filth from the hall." The guards stepped forward. The villagers whimpered. "Take another step," a voice rumbled from the shadows, "and you lose your feet." Kaelen emerged from the darkness of the side entrance. He leaned against a stone pillar, arms crossed over his chest. He looked relaxed, but the air around him vibrated with lethal tension. His eyes were amber, burning with a possessive light. Vane froze. "My king. She disrupts the order. She invites the rabble." "She invites my pack," Kaelen corrected softly. He pushed off the pillar and walked toward Aria. He moved like a panther stalking through tall grass. He stopped beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. The contact sent a jolt of reassurance down the bond. He looked at the crowd. He didn't look at them with contempt. He looked at them with curiosity. "My mate speaks for me," Kaelen announced. His voice carried to the back of the hall without shouting. "If she says the roof leaks, then the roof will be fixed. If she says you are hungry, you will be fed." He turned his gaze to Vane. "And if she says you are dismissed, councilman, then you are gone." Vane's face turned a mottled purple. He opened his mouth to argue, then snapped it shut. He bowed stiffly and retreated, his robe swirling around him like a storm cloud. Aria looked up at Kaelen. "I didn't ask for your permission." "I know," Kaelen murmured. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That is why I am standing here. You didn't need my permission. You just needed my teeth." He took her hand in front of them all. "Continue, my queen. I believe Mrs. Gable has more to say." Chapter 14, The Serpent's Smile. The victory in the petition hall felt like champagne in Aria's blood. For the first time, she felt the power of her position. She wasn't just surviving. She was ruling. But the high did not last. As night fell, the seer's riddle clawed back into her mind. Look to the blood that is not blood. She sat in Kaelen's library, surrounded by stacks of lineage scrolls. She was looking for bastards. For secret siblings. For anyone who could claim the throne. But the records were impeccable. Kaelen was the only heir. A knock on the door broke her concentration. "Enter," she called. Silas, one of the king's personal guards, stepped in. He carried a silver tray with a teapot. He was young, with an honest face and a quick smile. He had been kind to her when she was a servant, often sneaking her extra bread from the kitchens. "Tea, my queen," Silas said. He set the tray down. "Chamomile. To help you sleep. The king is in the war room." "Thank you, Silas," Aria said. She rubbed her temples. "I don't think sleep is on the menu tonight." "You should rest," Silas urged gently. He poured the tea. Steam curled into the air, smelling of flowers and honey. "The king worries about you. He says you are chasing ghosts." Aria looked at him. A strange chill walked down her spine. "I never told the king I was chasing ghosts," she said slowly. "I told him I was reading history." Silas froze. The teapot hovered in midair. The smile didn't leave his face, but it didn't reach his eyes anymore. His eyes were flat. Dead. "Figure of speech," Silas said. He placed the cup in front of her. "Drink." Aria looked at the cup. Then she looked at the tray. It was silver. Highly polished. In the reflection, she saw Silas's hand resting on the hilt of his dagger. The knuckles were white. The blood that is not blood. It wasn't a family relation. It was a blood brother. A sworn protector. Silas had grown up in the castle. He had trained with Kaelen. They had bled together on the training fields. "You let the assassin in," Aria whispered. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "You were on duty that night. You claimed the balcony door was secured." Silas sighed. He set the teapot down. "You are smarter than you look, Aria. It is a pity. I liked you better when you were just a mouse." "Why?" Aria stood up, putting the heavy oak desk between them. "Kaelen trusts you. You are his brother in arms." "Kaelen is a monster," Silas spat. The veneer of kindness vanished, revealing deep, festering rot. "He is cursed. We all know it. The madness is coming. And when it does, he will tear this kingdom apart. Roderick offers stability. He offers a cure. Roderick offers slavery," Aria countered. She glanced at the door. It was too far. Roderick offers a future where we aren't ruled by a ticking time bomb, Silas said. He drew his dagger. It wasn't silver. It was steel. Drink the tea, Aria. It is painless. Just go to sleep. If you die, the bond breaks. Kaelen goes mad with grief. The council removes him. Order is restored. He won't go mad, Aria said. Her hand crept toward the heavy iron paperweight on the desk. He will hunt you down. He will skin you alive. He will be too broken to hunt, Silas said. He stepped around the desk. Aria threw the paperweight. It was a desperate throw. It struck Silas in the chest, staggering him. Aria lunged for the door. Silas was faster. He grabbed her hair, jerking her back. Aria screamed. She clawed at his face, her nails digging deep. Die quietly. Silas hissed. He raised the knife. The door to the library didn't open. It disintegrated. Wood splinters exploded inward. A force of nature slammed into the room. Kaelen. He didn't look human. His clothes were tearing under the expansion of his muscles. His face was a muzzle of rage. He hit Silas with the force of a freight train. They crashed into the bookshelves. Ancient scrolls flew like confetti. Kaelen didn't use magic. He used brute, primal violence. He pinned Silas to the floor. His hand wrapped around the traitor's head. Kaelen, no. Aria screamed. If he killed Silas now, in this state, he would never come back. The bloodlust would consume him. Kaelen didn't hear her. He roared, a sound that shattered the windows. He raised his fist, ready to crush the skull of the man he had once called brother. Chapter 15, The Wolf Unbound. The library was a wreckage of paper and wood. The smell of violence was thick in the air, metallic and suffocating. Kaelen straddled Silas, his fist raised, trembling with the need to destroy. Silas laughed. He was bleeding from the mouth, broken and beaten, but he laughed. Do it, Silas wheezed. Show her what you are. Show her the beast. Kaelen's roar shook the foundations of the castle. The red light in his eyes was blinding. He was on the edge. One push, one death, and the man would be gone forever. Aria moved. She didn't run away. She ran toward him. She threw herself onto Kaelen's back. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her chest against the heaving muscles of his back. Kaelen, she shouted into his ear. Come back to me. He snarled, snapping his teeth at the air. He bucked, trying to throw her off. He was pure instinct now. A killing machine. He wants you to kill him. Aria cried. She dug her fingers into his shoulders, anchoring herself. If you kill him in anger, you lose. You lose yourself. You lose me. The words pierced the haze. You lose me. Kaelen froze. His fist hovered inches from Silas's face. His breath came in ragged, wet gasps. The growling in his chest vibrated through Aria's body. Mine, he rasped. The word was distorted. Alien. Yes, Aria soothed. She slid off his back and moved to kneel in front of him. She placed her hands on his face, ignoring the blood, ignoring the terrifying distortion of his features. I am yours. And you are mine. You are the king. Not the animal. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. Give him to the law. Do not give him your soul. Kaelen shuddered. A long, agonized whine escaped his throat. Slowly, painfully, the red in his eyes began to recede. The amber returned, swimming in a sea of unshed tears. He released Silas. Silas gasped, scrambling backward, clutching his bruised throat. "Guards!" Aria commanded. Her voice was whip-crack sharp. Enforcers rushed into the ruined room. They looked from the shattered furniture to the king kneeling on the floor. "Take him," Aria pointed at Silas. "To the deepest cell. If he speaks to anyone, cut out his tongue." The guards dragged Silas away. He didn't laugh anymore. He looked at Aria with wide, terrified eyes. He had expected the monster. He hadn't expected the queen. Kaelen collapsed. He slumped forward, his head hitting Aria's shoulder. He was heavy, dead weight. He was shaking so hard his teeth rattled. "I wanted to do it," he whispered. His voice was broken. "I wanted to tear him apart. I enjoyed the thought of it." "I know," Aria whispered back, stroking his hair. "But you didn't." "I am dangerous, Aria." He pulled back. He looked at his hands. The seer was right. The wolf is too strong. "Next time, you won't be able to stop me." "Then we make sure there is no next time," Aria said fiercely. A horn blasted from the courtyard. It was a deep, mournful sound. The alarm. Aria ran to the shattered window. Below, the gates were open. Torches flooded the courtyard. But it wasn't an attack. It was a gathering. Roderick's men were there. But they weren't alone. Half of Kaelen's own council stood with them. Vane was at the front. "The king is mad," Vane shouted to the gathered crowd. He pointed up at the ruined library window. "Look. He destroys his own castle. He attacks his own guards. The prophecy is fulfilled. The beast has consumed the man. We demand abdication." Roderick roared. "For the safety of the pack." The chant began. Low at first, then growing louder. "Abdicate. Abdicate." Kaelen stood up. He swayed, bracing himself against the wall. He looked defeated. "They are right," he said dully. "I cannot rule them. I cannot even rule myself." Aria turned to him. Her eyes blazed. "No," she said. She walked over to him. She grabbed his face again. "You are not going to quit," she hissed. "You are the Alpha King. And I am not going to let a group of traitors steal your crown because you had a bad day." "Aria, look at them," Kaelen gestured to the window. "They have the numbers. They have the fear." "They have fear," Aria agreed. She smoothed the front of her crimson dress. She wiped the blood from her cheek. "But we have the truth." She grabbed his hand. "We are going down there," she said. "And you are going to show them that the wolf is not your master. It is your weapon." "And if I fail?" Kaelen asked. He looked at her like she was his only lifeline. "Then we go down fighting," Aria said. "Together." She pulled him toward the door. Toward the sharks waiting in the water. Toward the point of no return. Chapter 16, The Altar of Sacrifice. The courtyard was a cauldron of noise and fire. Hundreds of torches sputtered in the wind, casting long, dancing shadows against the castle walls. The air smelled of unwashed bodies, pine resin, and the sharp, metallic tang of fear. Aria gripped Kaelen's hand. His palm was damp. His pulse hammered against her own skin, a frantic rhythm that matched the chaos below. They stood at the top of the wide stone stairs. Below them, the pack waited. It was a sea of angry faces upturned to the moonlight. "There he is," Vane shouted. He stood on a crate near the fountain. "The Mad King. Look at him. He cannot even stand without the help of his Omega whore." A roar went up from the crowd. It was a sound of betrayal. These were the people Kaelen had bled for. Now they looked at him like a rabid dog that needed to be put down. Kaelen stiffened. A low growl vibrated in his chest. The amber in his eyes began to bleed into red. "Easy," Aria whispered. She squeezed his hand. "Do not give them the monster. Give them the king." Kaelen straightened his spine. He forced his shoulders back. He descended the stairs. Aria walked beside him. Her crimson dress trailed on the stone. She felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on her. They were heavy with judgment. They reached the bottom. Roderick stepped forward. His men formed a semicircle of steel behind him. "You have lost the mandate of heaven, Kaelen," Roderick announced. He rested his hand on the hilt of his sword. "The council has voted. You are unfit. Abdicate. Or we will remove you by force." "You speak of force," Kaelen said. His voice was rough, but it carried. "But I see only treason. You bring foreign soldiers into my home. You incite panic with lies." "Lies?" Vane stepped up beside Roderick. He held up a scroll. "The seer has spoken. The prophecy is clear. If the mate accepts the beast within, the golden age will then begin. But look at you. You destroyed your own library. You attacked your own brother in arms. The bond is failing because she is weak. She is poisoning you." The crowd murmured. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Aria looked at Vane. Then she looked at the perimeter. Her heart stopped. Archers. They were positioned on the battlements. Dozens of them. And they weren't aiming at her. They were aiming at Kaelen. She realized the trap. This wasn't a negotiation. This was an execution disguised as a coup. If Kaelen fought, the archers would turn him into a pincushion. If he surrendered, Roderick would kill him in a cell. There was only one way out. The seer's words crashed into her mind. If the bond is severed by fear or hate, the king shall meet a rogue's dark fate. A rogue's fate was madness. But madness was better than death. If she broke the bond, the archers would stand down. Roderick would want Kaelen alive to legitimize his takeover. Aria looked at Kaelen. He was glaring at Roderick, his claws lengthening. He was ready to die for his crown. He was ready to die for her. She couldn't let him. She let go of his hand. The loss of contact was immediate. Kaelen turned to look at her, confusion clouding his fury. "Aria," he whispered. Aria stepped away from him. She walked toward Vane. The crowd went silent. "You are right," she said clearly. Her voice did not shake. She channeled every ounce of ice she had learned from years of invisibility. Kaelen froze. "Aria. What are you doing?" "The bond is a mistake," Aria announced. She turned to face the crowd. She refused to look at Kaelen. "I did not save the pups. I found them. I used the moment to trap a king. I thought I could control the power. I thought I could be queen." She looked at Vane. "But he is broken. The beast is too strong. I cannot fix him. I do not want him." "Liar." Kaelen roared. The sound was full of agony. He reached for her. "Stay back." Aria shouted. She recoiled as if his touch disgusted her. "I reject it. I reject the mark. I reject the bond." The words were ancient. They carried magic. Thunder cracked overhead. A bolt of lightning struck the fountain, shattering the stone. Kaelen gasped. He grabbed his chest. He fell to his knees. Chapter 17, The Sound of Breaking. The sound of a bond snapping was not a noise. It was a sensation. It felt like a ribcage being pried open. It felt like the sun was dying. Kaelen screamed. It was a sound that stripped the paint from the walls. He clawed at his chest, right over his heart, as if trying to dig the pain out. The golden light that usually shimmered around him turned gray. It turned to ash. Aria stood 5 feet away. She felt the break too. It tore through her soul like a serrated knife. Her knees buckled. She bit her tongue until blood filled her mouth to keep from screaming with him. She had to sell the lie. She had to be the villain. Seize him. Roderick commanded. The southern guards rushed forward. They produced chains made of heavy, dull silver. Kaelen didn't fight. He couldn't. The rejection had shattered him. He was on his hands and knees, vomiting blood onto the cobblestones. His eyes were wide and empty. He looked at Aria. That look would haunt her for eternity. It wasn't anger. It was pure, unadulterated heartbreak. He looked like a child who had been abandoned in the dark. "Why?" he rasped. The word was a bubble of blood. "Because I choose to live," Aria lied. Her voice was dead. "And you are death." The guards slammed Kaelen to the ground. They shackled his wrists and ankles. The silver burned his skin. Smoke rose from the contact points. He didn't even flinch. The pain in his heart was far greater than the fire on his skin. Vane walked over to Aria. He smiled. It was the smile of a viper that had just swallowed a mouse. "A wise choice, girl," Vane whispered. "You saved your own skin. Just like a true traitor's daughter." He turned to the guards. "Throw her out. If she returns to the territory, kill her on sight." 2 enforcers grabbed Aria's arms. They dragged her toward the main gates. She didn't fight. She kept her eyes on Kaelen. They were dragging him toward the dungeons. His head hung low. His hair dragged in the mud. He had stopped moving. He had stopped fighting. The king was gone. Only a broken shell remained. The heavy iron gates groaned open. The enforcers threw Aria forward. She stumbled, hitting the hard dirt of the road outside the walls. "Go," the guard sneered. "Run, little rat. Before the wolves get hungry." The gates slammed shut. The boom echoed like a gunshot. Aria lay in the dirt. The rain began to fall again. Cold. Unforgiving. It soaked her crimson dress, turning it dark, like a drying wound. She didn't get up. She curled into a ball. She pressed her face into the mud and screamed. She screamed until her throat was raw. She screamed until there was no air left in her lungs. She had saved his life. The archers had lowered their bows. Roderick had taken him alive. But she had killed him. She had looked into the eyes of the only person who had ever loved her, and she had driven a knife into his soul. The bond was silent. The warm, golden tether that had kept her safe, that had whispered of his presence, was gone. Inside her, there was only a gaping, bleeding hole. She was alone. Truly alone. And in the distance, from the depths of the castle dungeons, a howl rose up. It wasn't human. It had no reason. It had no hope. It was the sound of a wolf that had lost its moon. Kaelen was gone. The beast had taken the throne. Chapter 18, Ashes in the Wind. 3 days passed. Or maybe it was 3 years. Time had no meaning in the Deadlands. Aria huddled in the hollow of a rotted tree trunk. The forest here was twisted. The trees were gnarled black skeletons that clawed at the gray sky. This was the fringe of the territory. The place where rogues went to die. She was freezing. Her crimson dress was torn to shreds, stained with mud and moss. Her feet were bare and bleeding. She hadn't eaten. She didn't care. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. She saw the betrayal. Why? The word echoed in her skull. She shivered. The fever was setting in. Rejection sickness. It killed most wolves within a week. The body could not survive the trauma of a severed mate bond. Her heart was literally beating too slow. It was giving up. A twig snapped. Aria didn't move. If it was a rogue, let him take her. Let it be over. You look like hell, girl. The voice was scratchy. Familiar. Aria forced her eyes open. A figure stood over her. It was the seer from the crypts. She wore rags that blended with the forest floor. Her blindfold was stained with dirt. She tapped her cane against Aria's shin. Get up, the seer commanded. Let me die, Aria whispered. I broke him. I fulfilled your prophecy. The king met a rogue's fate. You saved his body, the seer scoffed. She reached down and grabbed Aria's arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. But you left his soul in the dark. Stupid girl. I told you that you were his medicine. You decided to be his amputation. It was the only way, Aria sobbed. She let the seer pull her to a sitting position. The archers. They were going to kill him. And now Roderick kills him slowly, the seer said. She sat down on a mossy rock. They have him in the iron cage. They are starving the wolf. They plan to break his mind completely. On the night of the new moon, Roderick will execute him as a mercy killing. He will claim the wolf has gone rabid. Aria's head snapped up. The new moon? 2 days, the seer said. He is alive? Aria asked. A spark ignited in the dead ash of her heart. Barely, the seer replied. He is lost in the madness. He calls for you. Even in the dark. Even after what you did. The wolf knows the lie, Aria. The man believed you. But the wolf knows. Aria looked at her hands. They were covered in dirt. They were the hands of a traitor. The hands of a survivor. The bond, Aria touched her chest. It's gone. Is it? The seer leaned forward. She tapped Aria's heart with a bony finger. If it were gone, you would be dead. You are not dead. You are dying. There is a difference. The seer grinned. It was a terrifying sight. You rejected him with words. But did you reject him with your heart? No, Aria whispered. Never. Then the tether holds, the seer said. It is frayed. It is thin as a spider web. But it holds. And as long as it holds, he can be pulled back. Aria struggled to her feet. Her legs shook. The world spun. But the spark in her chest was growing. It was a tiny flame now. How? Aria asked. I am exiled. I have no army. I have no weapon. I am a girl in a torn dress. You are the one who walked into the forbidden forest and came out with the king's soul, the seer said. She stood up. You don't need an army, little mouse. You need a distraction. The seer pointed a crooked finger toward the east. Toward the hidden caves of the Stone Ridge. The resistance hides in the caves, the seer said. Loyalists. Silas's friends who didn't turn. They are waiting for a sign. They think their king is broken. They think their queen is a traitor. Aria wiped the mud from her face. She stood straighter. The pain in her chest was still there, but it had changed. It wasn't the pain of death anymore. It was the pain of purpose. "They are right," Aria said. Her voice hardened. "I am a traitor. I betrayed my mate to save his life." She looked at the castle in the distance. The towers were black spikes against the horizon. Somewhere in that darkness, Kaelen was waiting to die. "But I am done running," Aria vowed. She looked at the seer. "Take me to the resistance. I have a king to steal." Chapter 19, The Cave of Forgotten Loyalty. The stone ridge was a graveyard of jagged rocks that tore at the sky. The wind howled through the crevices. It sounded like the mourning cries of 1,000 widows. Aria followed the seer up the treacherous path. Her bare feet bled on the shale, but she did not stop. She could not stop. Every step was a battle against the gravity of her own exhaustion. The fever of the severed bond burned hot under her skin. It made the world tilt and sway. But the tiny, frantic pulse of Kaelen's heart, beating somewhere in the distance, pulled her forward. They reached a narrow fissure in the cliff face. It looked like nothing more than a shadow. The seer didn't hesitate. She slipped inside. Aria followed, the darkness swallowing her whole. The air inside changed instantly. It smelled of wood smoke, wet fur, and unwashed bodies. The scent of wolf. "Halt!" The command came from everywhere and nowhere. Torches flared to life along the walls. Aria blinked against the sudden harsh light. She was in a massive cavern. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like the fangs of a stone beast. And she was surrounded. 20 warriors stood in a circle around her. They wore tattered armor and the weary expressions of men who had lost everything. Their swords were drawn. The tips were pointed at her throat. A man stepped into the light. It was Thorn. Kaelen's beta. He looked like a ghost of his former self. His face was gaunt. A fresh scar ran down his cheek. He looked at Aria with eyes that held no recognition, only hatred. "You have nerve," Thorn spat. He raised a heavy broadsword. "The traitor queen returns to finish the job. Did Roderick send you to sniff us out?" "I am not here for Roderick," Aria said. Her voice was hoarse but steady. She pushed past the fear. "I am here for Kaelen." Thorn laughed. It was a dark, ugly sound. "You killed him. We all saw it. You broke the bond and left him to rot in the mud. Do not speak his name with your lying tongue." He stepped closer. The tip of his blade pressed against the hollow of her throat. A drop of blood welled up. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't take your head right now." "Because I am the only one who knows how to get into the castle without tripping the alarms," Aria said. She didn't flinch. She leaned into the blade. "And because I didn't break the bond to kill him. I broke it to stop the archers from turning him into a corpse." Thorn paused. His eyes narrowed. "The archers?" "There were 40 men on the battlements," Aria said quickly. "Roderick gave the order. If Kaelen fought, he died. I had to make him surrender. I had to make him weak enough to be taken alive." Murmurs rippled through the circle of warriors. They looked at each other. The logic held, but the anger was deep. "He is dying," Thorn said, his voice dropping. "We have spies. He has not eaten. He does not speak. He sits in the dark and waits for the end. You broke his mind, Aria." "Then help me fix it," Aria pleaded. She fell to her knees. Not in submission, but in desperation. "The seer says the thread still holds. He is waiting for me. But Roderick executes him tomorrow at the new moon. We have one night." The seer stepped forward from the shadows. She tapped her cane on the stone floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. She speaks the truth, Thorn, the seer croaked. The girl walked through the fire to get here. She smells of death, but she carries the king's life in her pocket. Thorn looked at the seer. Then he looked down at Aria. He saw the dirt on her face. He saw the shredded crimson dress. He saw the fire in her eyes that refused to go out. Slowly, he lowered the sword. We have 20 men, Thorn said heavily. Roderick has 300. This is a suicide mission. Aria stood up. She wiped the blood from her neck. Good, she said. Then they won't be expecting us. Chapter 20, The Heart of the Mountain. The war room was a flat slab of rock in the center of the cave. A crude map of the castle was drawn on it in charcoal. Aria leaned over the map. Her fever spiked, sending shivers down her spine, but she forced her mind to focus. She pointed to a thin line near the castle kitchens. Here, she said. The old sluice gate. It was sealed up years ago because of the smell. But the grate is rusted. A strong wolf could kick it in. It leads to the sewers, a warrior named Jax grunted. He wrinkled his nose. We will smell like shit before we even draw a weapon. Better to smell like shit than to be dead, Aria countered. The sewers dump out into the lower dungeon level. Right next to the holding cells. Thorn traced the line with a dirty finger. It bypasses the main guard barracks. It is smart. But once we are in, we are trapped. If we grab the king, we have to fight our way up and out the main gate. We don't just grab him, Aria said. She looked at the map, but in her mind, she saw the golden thread. It was so thin now. Barely a whisper. We have to wake him up. If I can get to him, if I can touch him, I can restart the bond. I can give him his strength back. And if he is too far gone? Thorn asked quietly. If he is just a rabid animal? Then I will let him kill me, Aria said softly. And you can run. Silence fell over the table. The warriors looked at her with a new kind of respect. She wasn't a queen sitting on a throne. She was a soldier preparing for the front line. We will move in 2 hours, Thorn decided. He slammed his fist on the table. Sharpen your blades. Tonight we take back our king or we join him in the ground. The warriors dispersed. The cave filled with the sound of whetstones on steel. Aria retreated to a quiet corner. She needed a moment. She sat on a pile of furs and closed her eyes. She reached out into the void inside her chest. Kaelen. She sent the name down the frayed wire of their connection. There was no answer. Just a cold, howling wind. She tried again. She poured every memory of the night in the woods into the thought. The smell of rain. The touch of his hand. The way he had looked at her when he said she was his medicine. Hold on, she whispered in her mind. I am coming. A flicker. It was faint. Weak. Like a candle in a hurricane. But it was there. A pulse of recognition. A tiny, desperate warmth. He was there. Buried under mountains of pain and madness, he was still there. Here. Thorn stood over her. He held out a bundle of clothes. You can't fight in a dress. Aria took the bundle. It was leather armor. Too big, but functional. She stood up and shed the ruined crimson silk. It fell to the floor like a pool of blood. She pulled on the leather breeches. She laced the vest tight over her chest. She felt different. The girl who had hidden in the shadows was gone. The girl who had tried to play politics was gone. She braided her hair back, pulling it tight against her skull. She grabbed a dagger from the pile of weapons and strapped it to her thigh. She turned to Thorn. I'm ready. Thorn nodded. A grim smile touched his lips. You look like a queen of war, Aria. No, Aria said. She walked toward the cave exit, her boots crunching on the stone. I look like an Omega who has run out of patience. Chapter 21, Into the Lion's Den. The sewers were worse than Aria remembered. The tunnel was narrow, slick with slime, and smelled of centuries of decay. The water rushed past their knees, freezing and foul. Aria led the way. She held a small glowstone the seer had given her. Its pale blue light barely cut through the gloom. Thorn was right behind her, his breathing ragged in the tight space. Behind him, 18 other wolves moved in silence. Rats scuttled along the ledges, their eyes reflecting the blue light. Aria ignored them. Her focus was entirely on the grate ahead. They reached the dead end. The iron bars were thick with rust, just as she had promised. Jax, Thorn whispered. The large warrior moved forward. He braced his shoulder against the metal. He pushed. Veins popped in his neck. With a screech of tearing metal, the grate gave way. It fell into the water with a heavy splash. They froze. Waiting for a shout. Waiting for an alarm. Silence. They climbed through the opening and found themselves in the subbasement. It was dry here, but the air was stale. They were directly beneath the dungeon cells. Up the stairs, Aria signaled. They moved like ghosts. The leather armor made no sound. They reached the heavy wooden door that led to the cell block. Aria pressed her ear against it. She heard voices. He's heavy for a corpse, a guard grumbled. Just drag him, another replied. Roderick wants him on the dais before the moon peaks. He wants the whole pack to see the alpha beg. Aria's blood ran cold. They weren't keeping him in the cell. They were moving him early. She looked at Thorn. His eyes were wide. The plan relied on surprising them in the confined space of the dungeon. If Kaelen was in the courtyard, he was surrounded by 300 guards. We are too late, Jax hissed. No, Aria said. She drew her dagger. Her hand was steady. We are just in time to make a scene. She didn't wait for Thorn's approval. She pushed the door open. The corridor was empty, save for the 2 guards dragging a limp figure toward the lift. Kaelen. He was unrecognizable. He was skeletal. His skin was gray. He was shackled hand and foot, his head lolling on his chest. He didn't look like a king. He looked like a broken doll. Rage, hot and white, exploded in Aria's chest. She didn't sneak. She sprinted. The guards heard her footsteps. They turned, reaching for their swords. They were too slow. Aria slammed into the first guard. She drove her dagger into the gap of his armor, right under the arm. He gasped and crumpled. Thorn and the others surged past her, taking down the second guard before he could shout. Aria dropped to her knees beside Kaelen. Kaelen, she whispered. She grabbed his face. His skin was ice cold. He didn't open his eyes. His breathing was shallow, rattling in his chest. He smelled of sickness and despair. Wake up, she commanded. She pressed her forehead to his. I'm here. I came back. Nothing. The bond remained silent. The flicker she had felt in the cave was gone. We have to move, Thorn urged. The lift is coming down. Someone heard the scuffle. The heavy chains of the cargo lift rattled. It was descending. More guards were coming. Aria looked at Kaelen. He was too heavy to carry back through the sewers. And he was dying. If she dragged him into the filth, the shock would kill him. There was only one way out. Up. Put him on the lift, Aria said. She stood up. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. What? Thorn stared at her. That goes straight to the courtyard. Straight to Roderick. Exactly, Aria said. She wiped the blood from her dagger on her trousers. Roderick wants a show? Let's give him one. She looked at the warriors. We ride the lift up. We come out in the center of the execution. We protect the king until I can wake him up. And if he doesn't wake up? Jax asked. Aria looked at Kaelen's still form. She touched the mark on her neck. It was cold, but it was still there. Then we die protecting him, Aria said. Load him up. The warriors lifted Kaelen's body onto the wooden platform. They crowded around him, swords drawn, a circle of steel protecting their fallen alpha. Aria stood at the front. She reached up and pulled the lever. The gears groaned. The lift jerked and began to rise. They rose out of the dark. Toward the moonlight. Toward the army waiting to kill them. Aria took a deep breath. She didn't pray. She didn't hope. She simply prepared to bleed. The mouse was gone. The queen was coming to claim her throne. Chapter 22, The Queen's Mark. The gears of the lift shrieked like banshees. It was a sound that cut through the chanting of the crowd above. Aria stood over Kaelen's body. She gripped her dagger until her knuckles turned white. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was it. The moment the world ended or the moment it began. Thorn and the resistance warriors formed a tight phalanx around the platform. They looked like statues carved from grim determination. They knew they were rising into a slaughter. The platform cleared the lip of the dungeon shaft. For a second there was silence. The sudden appearance of 20 armed warriors in the center of the execution stage stunned the 300 guards surrounding them. Roderick stood on the dais. He held a heavy executioner's axe. His mouth fell open. Now. Thorn roared. The resistance surged forward. They didn't wait for the shock to wear off. They crashed into the front line of Roderick's guards with the force of a tidal wave. Steel clashed against steel. Sparks flew into the night air. Aria didn't move. She stayed in the center of the chaos. She knelt beside Kaelen. The battle raged inches from her face. A guard lunged at her. Jax intercepted him, nearly taking the man's head off with a brutal swing of his mace. Wake up. Aria screamed. She shook Kaelen's shoulders. He was dead weight. His head rolled back. His eyes were open but glazed over with a milky film. The bond was silent. The golden thread she had felt earlier had snapped under the proximity of the wolfsbane collars Roderick's men must have used. Kill the girl. Roderick bellowed from the dais. Kill the witch. The circle of defenders was shrinking. There were too many of them. Thorn went down on one knee, blood pouring from a gash on his forehead. Jax was fighting 3 men at once. Aria looked at Kaelen. She saw the hollowness in his face. The seer's words crashed into her mind. You are his medicine. Medicine wasn't enough. He didn't need healing. He needed a reason to stay. He needed a tether strong enough to pull a soul back from the abyss. She looked at the mark on her own neck. The place where he had claimed her. It was a one-way street. He had marked her. He had given her his protection. But she had never given him hers. She had never claimed the monster. Aria threw her dagger aside. She grabbed Kaelen's hair, pulling his head back to expose the thick column of his throat. I do not accept your death, she hissed. Tears hot and angry streamed down her face. I do not accept your surrender. She leaned down. She didn't kiss him. She opened her mouth and sank her teeth into the junction of his neck and shoulder. She bit down hard. She tasted copper. She tasted the salt of his skin. It wasn't a gentle nip. It was a claim. It was primal violence. She poured every ounce of her love, her rage, and her defiance into the bite. Mine. She screamed the word into his soul. The reaction was nuclear. A shockwave of golden light exploded from Kaelen's body. It knocked Aria back. It threw the nearest guards off their feet. The shackles on Kaelen's wrists shattered. The silver melted, dripping onto the stone like wax. Kaelen arched his back. A sound tore from his throat that was neither man nor wolf. It was the sound of a god waking up. He stood. He didn't struggle to rise. He levitated to his feet. The gray pallor of his skin vanished, replaced by a vibrant, terrifying flush of power. His shirt shredded as muscles expanded. The thorny tattoo on his chest glowed with a blinding white light. He opened his eyes. They weren't red. They weren't amber. They were solid, molten gold. Roderick froze on the dais. His axe lowered. For the first time, the usurper looked small. Kaelen turned to Aria. He didn't look at the battle. He didn't look at the army. He looked only at her. He reached out and touched the fresh, bleeding bite mark on his neck. "You marked me," he said. His voice was a rumble of thunder that shook the stones of the castle. "I claimed what is mine," Aria replied. She stood up, her legs trembling, her chin high. "Now finish this." Kaelen turned to the army. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't shift. He simply released the leash. The aura of the true alpha hit the courtyard. It wasn't fear. It was command. It was a biological imperative that forced every wolf in a 5-mile radius to drop to their knees. The guards dropped their swords. The southern warriors collapsed, whining, their foreheads pressing into the dirt. Even Thorn and the resistance fighters fell, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the power. Only Roderick remained standing. He fought it. He shook violently, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. "No!" Roderick screamed. "I am the alpha. I am the stronger wolf." Kaelen walked toward him. He moved with a calm, fluid grace. He stepped up onto the dais. "You are nothing," Kaelen said softly. "You are a dog barking at the moon." Roderick swung the axe. Kaelen caught the blade with his bare hand. He didn't even flinch. He twisted his wrist. The steel handle snapped like a dry twig. Kaelen grabbed Roderick by the throat. He lifted him into the air. "My mate showed you mercy," Kaelen said. His golden eyes burned. "I have no such inclination." He threw Roderick. The southern alpha flew across the courtyard. He hit the castle wall with a sickening crunch and slid down, motionless. Silence fell over Ravenwood. Kaelen stood alone on the dais. He looked at the sea of kneeling wolves. Then he turned and extended his hand to Aria. She walked up the steps. She placed her hand in his. Kaelen pulled her close. He turned to the pack. "Behold," he roared. "My queen. The one who tamed the storm." Chapter 23, The Dawn of Ravencroft. The sun rose over a kingdom that had changed overnight. The stench of fear that had plagued Ravenwood for decades was gone, washed away by the rain and the golden fire of the king's return. Aria sat in the infirmary. She held a damp cloth to Thorn's forehead. The beta was battered, covered in bruises, but he was grinning like a fool. "I thought we were dead," Thorn chuckled. He winced as he laughed. "When that lift started rising, I made my peace with the ancestors." "You fought well, Thorn," Aria said. She tied the bandage. Rest now. The war is over. Is it? Thorn asked. He looked toward the door where 2 enforcers stood guard. Vane is still unaccounted for. And the southern pack is restless without a leader. Vane is in the dungeons, a voice said from the doorway. Kaelen stood there. He had washed the blood from his skin. He wore a fresh tunic of black velvet, the collar high enough to hide the bite mark Aria had left, though she knew it was there. She could feel it pulsing through the bond. The bond was no longer a fraying wire. It was a river. It flowed between them, wide and deep, carrying emotions, thoughts, and a profound sense of peace. Kaelen walked into the room. The nurses curtsied low. He ignored them. He went straight to Aria. Vane was found trying to sneak out through the scullery, Kaelen said. He took Aria's hand, his thumb rubbing over her knuckles. He was carrying half the treasury in a sack. And Roderick? Aria asked. Alive, Kaelen said. His face hardened. Broken, but alive. He will be sent back to the south in chains. They can decide what to do with a failed alpha. I suspect his own pack will not be kind. He looked at Thorn. You are beta again, Thorn. If you want the job. Silas is gone. Thorn tried to sit up. It would be my honor, my king. Rest, Kaelen commanded gently. He pulled Aria out of the infirmary and into the hallway. It was crowded with courtiers, servants, and guards. The moment they saw the couple, the chatter died. They bowed. Not the terrified scraping bows of the past, but genuine gestures of respect. They had seen the girl in the crimson dress rise from the sewers to save their king. They knew who held the true power now. Kaelen led her out to the balcony overlooking the courtyard. The pack was gathered below. Thousands of them. They were waiting. They want to see you, Kaelen said. They want to see you, Aria corrected. You are the alpha. I am the body, Kaelen said. He turned her to face him. He tucked a stray curl behind her ear. His golden eyes were soft, filled with a vulnerability that would have terrified her a week ago. Now, it just made her love him more. You are the heart, Aria. You saved me from the madness. You anchored the beast. I bit you, Aria reminded him with a small smile. Kaelen chuckled. It was a rich, warm sound. Yes. You did. And in doing so, you completed the circuit. The prophecy said the mate must accept the beast. You didn't just accept him. You claimed him. He kissed her forehead. The beast loves you more than the man does, I think. That is a terrifying thought, Aria laughed. Kaelen turned her toward the railing. Step forward. Let them see the queen who walked through fire. Aria stepped to the edge. A roar went up from the crowd. It was deafening. Hail the queen. Hail the queen. Aria looked down at the sea of faces. She saw Mrs. Gable waving a handkerchief. She saw the young guard who had opened the doors for her. She saw a kingdom that was no longer broken. She felt Kaelen step up behind her. His arm wrapped around her waist, solid and warm. He rested his chin on top of her head. We have a lot of work to do, he murmured against her hair. The council needs rebuilding. The borders need securing. We will handle it, Aria said. She leaned back into him. She felt the steady, powerful beat of his heart against her back. It beat in perfect sync with hers. Together, he asked. Together, she promised. The sun climbed higher, bathing the castle in light. The long shadow of the traitor's daughter was gone. In its place stood a queen cast in gold. Chapter 24, The Song of the Wolf. 6 months later. The forest floor was a carpet of red and gold leaves. The air was crisp, smelling of impending winter. Aria walked through the trees. She didn't wear silk or velvet. She wore sturdy leather boots and a wool cloak. She walked alone, but she was never truly solitary. The bond hummed in the back of her mind, a constant, comforting presence. She reached the clearing. The same clearing where she had found the snare. It looked different now. The brambles had been cleared away. Wildflowers grew in patches of sunlight. A rustle in the bushes drew her attention. 3 wolves tumbled out of the undergrowth. They were bigger now. Gangly teenagers with paws too large for their bodies. One was silver. One was gray. And the leader, the largest of them, was pitch black with eyes of intelligent gold. The black wolf yipped when he saw her. He didn't growl. He didn't snap. He bounded across the clearing and slammed into her legs, nearly knocking her over. Aria laughed, sinking her hands into his thick fur. "Hello to you too, Shadow." The other 2 joined the pile, licking her hands, whining for attention. These were the heirs. The future of the pack. And they looked at her not as a savior, but as a mother. "You spoil them." Kaelen stepped out from behind an ancient oak. He carried a basket. He looked relaxed, younger than his years. The heavy weight of the crown seemed to have lifted from his brow. "Someone has to," Aria said, scratching Shadow behind the ears. "You are too busy teaching them how to hunt." "Survival is a necessary skill," Kaelen said. He walked over and sat on a fallen log. He patted the space beside him. Aria joined him. The pups went back to wrestling in the leaves. "Do you remember this place?" Kaelen asked. He looked at the clearing. "I remember thinking I was going to die," Aria admitted. "I remember a terrifying shadow with red eyes telling me to run." Kaelen took her hand. He brought it to his lips. "I remember seeing the bravest thing I had ever witnessed. A girl with no magic, no rank, and no weapon, standing between death and my bloodline." He looked at her. His eyes were clear gold. The madness was a distant memory. The stability of the bond had cured the alpha curse. He was strong, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But he was no longer a slave to the rage. "The seer left today," Aria said softly. "She went back to the mountains. She said her work here is done." "Did she give you a new prophecy?" Kaelen asked. "No," Aria shook her head. "She said we don't need prophecies anymore. We make our own fate." Kaelen smiled. He reached into the basket and pulled out a wrapped bundle. "I have something for you." Aria unwrapped the cloth. Inside lay a dagger. But it wasn't made of steel or iron. It was forged from obsidian and inlaid with veins of gold. The hilt was carved in the shape of a wolf and a woman intertwined. "It is not for fighting," Kaelen said. "Though I know you will use it if you have to. It is for the ceremony tonight." "What ceremony?" Aria asked. "The naming," Kaelen said. He looked at the black pup. "Shadow needs a real name. He is the heir. And the pack agrees that the queen should be the one to bestow it." Aria ran her thumb over the gold inlay. She looked at the pup, who was currently chewing on his brother's tail. "Orion," she said. "The hunter." "A strong name," Kaelen agreed. He stood up and pulled her to her feet. The wind picked up, swirling the leaves around them. "Are you happy, Aria?" he asked. It was a serious question. He was always checking, always making sure the cage hadn't closed around her again. Aria looked at the castle in the distance. She looked at the man who held her heart in his hands. She looked at the woman she had become. She wasn't the frightened girl hiding in the shadows. She was the storm that had cleared the sky. "I am free," Aria said. She wrapped her arms around his neck. And I am loved. That is more than happy. That is everything. Kaelen lowered his head. He kissed her, slow and deep. It tasted of the forest and forever. Around them, the pups stopped playing. They sat and pointed their muzzles to the sky. Orion let out a long, melodic howl. Kaelen pulled back and joined him, his deep baritone harmonizing with the pup's high pitch. Aria closed her eyes and listened. It wasn't a cry of pain. It wasn't a warning. It was a song of home. She threw her head back and let her own voice join the chorus. The sound rang out over the trees, over the village, over the kingdom. The traitor's daughter was dead. Long live the Wolf Queen.